Good morning. It's Thursday, December 18th, 2014. This is Tech Talk Today, episode 108. My name is Chris, and it's just me in the studio today, but don't worry. We have a special treat, a awesome Mumble Room. Time-appropriate greetings, Mumble Room.
Well,
hello.
And still hungover from last night's Unfiltered.
Yeah, a little bit. I am too. So thankfully, though, Fate, who is on school break, he's fresh, he's sharp, he's going to keep us on the straight and narrow, Eric, so don't worry about it. I know. And speaking of Unfiltered, we talked about this a little bit last night, but I think it deserves a little attention here in Tech Talk today, and maybe we'll get some extra details. So we're going to open up our Sony Entertainment hack section of Tech Talk today. Yeah, that's how you know it's legit right there. So first of all, this came out yesterday. The U.S. officials, this has been really an interesting back and forth where the FBI came out and said, no, there's really no evidence that North Korea is involved. However, this is according to the New York Times. American officials have concluded that North Korea was centrally involved in the hacking of Sony Pictures, even as the studio has concealed some of their involvement, they say. Senior officials who would not be named and did not want to speak on the record implied that maybe North Korea's involvement was more at a contractual hiring basis. Intelligence officials have concluded that the cyber attack was both state-sponsored and far more destructive than any seen before on American soil. There are still differences of opinion over whether North Korea was aided by Sony insiders with knowledge of the company's computer systems, senior administration officials said. I still think this has to be an insider, too.
Yeah, it sounds like a bunch of cyber hitmen were hired, if that's the case.
Ooh, cyber hitmen. Now, what's interesting is as this is coming out about an hour before the New York Times article was published, Wired published a piece saying the evidence that North Korea hacked Sony is flimsy, and they cite a lot of reasons in this piece. They've even updated it since the New York Times article was published to address some of the points in the New York Times article. So they're still saying it's kind of hard to make the link. And the FBI hasn't retracted their statement that there's no connection to North Korea.
Well, here's maybe a little bit of bacon. I'm going to just go there first. But what if that person on the inside was contacted by North Korea to get that going?
Sure.
How does that work? They just knock on your door, or
you never know.
Yeah.
Maybe there's family ties or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, or they get bought off, or sure, maybe, right?
Compromise in some way.
But I think so. Why there's so much ambiguity around this right now is, in a major way, the reporting has failed to really deliver on who the hell the GOP is, what their connection is, how legitimate the ties to North Korea really are. The media has been so focused on the gossip and the contents of the Sony Pictures files and the cyber boogeyman aspect of this that they really haven't spent any time seeing how legitimate this group is. We don't know if these are a couple of guys in, Texas, let alone China or North Korea, let alone if they have the ability to carry out like a 9/11 style attack that they've supposedly been threatening.
Yeah, they definitely caved to lack of information is basically what it comes down to.
And so as a result, though, because, what is reported becomes reality, at least in the eyes of the consumer, and there's probably no industry that's more susceptible to how people are consuming things through the media than the movie industry, Sony has canceled the December 25th release of the interview because of this 9/11 vague-esque threat that the GOP hacker group, I guess, sent to Sony. They said that the interview won't be seen in major theaters. They decided to not move forward with the planned December 25th theatrical release of the interview, the company said in a statement.
A little disclaimer, not to be confused with the Republican Party.
Right, yeah. So I kind of understand why Sony had to do this. My visceral reaction to this was, Sony, you just crossed a line. You've crossed a line now where anybody can be a quote-unquote cyber terrorist and do something to your computer system and then threaten something in the physical world. It could be another movie, right? It could be a book release. Anything like this now is sort of it sets an interesting precedent. So that's my first.
That's just it.
Go ahead.
They've caved to the terrorists, if you want to look at it that way. The terrorists have won.
Yeah.
Because now they've got the fear going on.
Right.
It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I understand that the people making these decisions aren't necessarily fluent in the technological sector, but if there has to be somebody on the inside of Sony, like you can't remotely get this kind of information. And if you had that ability to commit some kind of act of terrorism that would actually be destructive, why would you not do it because of this movie not being released? If you're selling these kinds of hacks to North Korea or whoever, then why wouldn't you just take somebody else's money and do it anyway? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Right. What happens? Yeah, exactly. And what happens when it's the next movie? And is this going to tie the hands of creative production? But the problem is, what Sony's up against is I can't really blame them. This has been the big story in all media outlets, in tech media, in mainstream media, because there's not a lot going on in the holiday cycle, and they've created this reality. And I thought this is interesting. Peter W. Singer, he's one of the nation's foremost experts on cybersecurity, at least according to this piece on Vice. And I have heard his name before. North Korea may really be behind the Sony hack, maybe not, but we're acting like idiots, Peter says. He says, here, we need to distinguish between the threat and capability or the ability to steal gossipy emails from a not-so-great protected computer network is not the same thing as being able to carry out a physical 9/11-style attack in 18,000 locations simultaneously. I can't believe I'm saying this. I cannot believe I have to say this.
And he's got a very good point, because if you look at, I mean, it's basically Sony doesn't know. They don't know anything about this, but they're going about it completely the wrong way.
Well, so here's why I don't really put too much blame on Sony.
Well, it's political for one thing.
Yeah, here's the situation they're in now, right? So they've kind of a lot of dirt has been kicked up through these leaks where they talk about people in their own industry. So they've kind of already stepped on some toes just right there, right? But also, if these threats continue and people get legitimately afraid of a terrorist attack on December 25th, because, the media is going to continue to play this, then that's going to pull sales away from all of the movies. All of the movies on December 25th. Not only that, but that is a huge movie day, because that's the day like entire families go to the movies, right? So here's
Absolutely.
how Sony has two ways they have to look at this. They have to, number one, have to be good guys Sony and be like, all right, well, we don't want to hurt everybody else's sales because the media is going to make a frenzy out of this. And also, they have to also say, you know what, we understand this is a time when families often go to the movies together, and we don't want to do anything to put families in danger. Like, their only option, if you think about it, is to cancel the movie. I think it sucks. Right. I think it hurts free speech. It's probably not a great movie. It's probably another reason why they don't mind canceling it. But I think I think they had no choice.
Well, it becomes definitely a return on investment issue, because either they're going to hurt that one movie or they're going to hurt all their movies. And that's probably what they're looking at.
Yeah. Fate, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I think that makes sense. It's a clear, logical progression. I was curious myself on how they were justifying it monetarily, but you make a good point. If they didn't do it, then people's fear would drive down sales, and that's not acceptable to them.
They'll have to release it eventually, right? I mean, they're going to have to.
Oh, yeah. Even if it's direct to disc, they'll get it out there because, they want money back.
Now, you want to hear my conspiracy? I could fry a little bacon.
No, please do.
I think it was going to be a bad movie to begin with, so I don't think it wasn't going to be the big number one Christmas movie. I think Sony knew that, calculated that, and has determined that they could re-release it at another time where they make more money. Now it goes down as a loss for 2014 for them to demonstrate how bad this attack was. This is another check mark in the spreadsheet of how devastating the cyber attack against Sony was, is the cost of not launching this on the biggest movie day, or one of the biggest movie days of the year. And the reason why I want to fill in a little background color here with a clip we played last night on Filter, and listen to how this news anchor really sells. This is a new form of cyber terrorism we're dealing with here. This is cyber threats.
The Sony cyber attackers issuing new threats, now suggesting they'll take revenge on movie theaters slated to premiere The Interview, a parody aimed at the North Korean leader. What started as Hollywood gossip quickly morphing into a possible terror plot being assessed at the highest levels. Just how credible is the threat? Here's ABC's Cecilia Vega.
So it's a new type of cyber threat. It's really scary, right? And Sony you saw the New York Times article. It was the the most devastating threat on American soil ever. So it all builds towards that too. The victim aspect of it.
I think it was an interesting that they were making a lot out of a threat that we don't have a credibility on.
Right. I mean, how would they do this? These computer hackers, how would they do this?
Right. Exactly.
Shadow.
Magic.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Shadow, you had something you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I think Sony's just building more. They just want more people to watch it, in my opinion.
Maybe they'll release in the summer, and by then we'll be all like, oh yeah, that was that movie that got delayed. Let's go see that. Could be.
I think that's an excellent point, because even if they don't have the enormous sales they wanted to, just that kind of delayed tension from this incident should generate enough interest at a later date to at least get back the return on their revenue or their investment on the movie.
Yeah.
And then they're not really out anything.
Yeah.
So
they got to get paid. And the other thing I thought that might be an interesting possibility is maybe it was going to be a bit of a stinker in the box office, but right now nobody's seen it, so we don't know if it's a stinker. A lot of hype, plus some big names attached to it. Wouldn't this be an interesting opportunity to launch it as, well, we didn't release it in the theaters, but now Sony Pictures is releasing it through, and maybe it's Netflix, maybe it's, I don't know what service, maybe it's their own system, but I could see, like, this could be also the movie that, like, really puts a new online movie distribution platform on a spotlight, too.
Well, I wonder if they got some feedback from critics as well, because they always release early to critics. So,
Not always.
Most of the time. But, like, for instance, maybe I wonder if the critics said, yeah, this is meh or even garbage, and they're like, okay, well, we can stand to take a hit on this one.
We'll see. All right, let's move on. Enough about the Sony stuff. Jeez, it's just crazy. And now that the U.S., well, somebody in the U.S. government, off the record, is telling the New York Times that it is linked to North Korea, this is going to take an interesting direction. So do you remember a couple of weeks ago I talked about the testimony that was recorded by Steve Jobs before he died over that whole iTunes DRM lawsuit? Well, on Tuesday, a jury found Apple not guilty of locking customers into a monopoly digital music ecosystem with the iPod and iTunes in fair play. So plaintiffs in the case sought $350 million, which was going to be up to about $1 billion after all was said and done. But it didn't actually. They didn't win. But also, as part of that, District Court Judge Gonzalez Rogers said that with both Apple and plaintiffs in her rulings, she said that Steve Jobs' testimony will remain sealed. It won't be shown to the public. And for its part, Apple noted that the court has a duty to protect witness testimony. If they showed the Jobs deposition and made it public, it would set a precedent for the release of videotape testimonies from other high-profile witnesses in future cases. So I know some of you were wondering about that when we covered that recently. So that kind of, I think, closes that. I guess it could leak out one day.
A little bit of a fail, if you ask me.
So it's too bad Tubsta isn't here this morning. He's probably still recovering from the unfiltered hangover, too.
Yeah.
So over 9,000 PCs in Australia are infected by a TorrentLocker type ransomware. It's similar to TorrentLocker malware, and I'm not sure if it's the same, though. And it's earned already as much as $585,000. $585,000. Why am I?
Wow.
That's just how they oh, okay. So they infected 39,000 PCs. Wow, that's quite a bit actually. 9,000 were in Australia. If you're a Windows user in Australia who hasn't had their files encrypted by hackers after visiting a bogus Australia Post website, so they propped up a fake news website and then infected your machine when you went there. You were infected by TorrentLocker if you visited, likely if you're on a Windows box. So they have tens of thousands of dollars coming. That's crazy.
That's a ton of money.
Yeah.
For one piece of malware.
Yeah. And just like releasing it on the web and sitting back and making money from it. It just blows
I've got
my
a
mind.
funny story about that, actually. Got a call the other night, and they were telling me, are you the owner of the Windows computer? Oh, I'm like,
yeah.
At that
yeah,
point,
we've gotten those
like,
too.
Oh, nice try.
Yeah.
Nice try.
Yeah, Angela, when she gets those calls, she plays along for a little bit. It's usually fun. And I just get to sit there and listen and squeal. Well, so, you know what? I didn't build a botnet. I didn't encrypt people's files. I didn't infect over 9,000 Australian PCs. That's not how I make my money. But unfortunately, maybe I should have. But in the meantime, patreon.com/today is how you can fund our future endeavors over here at the Jupiter Broadcasting Network and give us the runway to be a little weird and be picky. Patreon.com/today. Your money there, whatever you can afford, helps directly fund the development of all of our shows. Every single show. Over the holiday break next week, I'm going to be doing a lot of upgrades that are both software and hardware. And some of the hardware upgrades are not like major stuff, but they're things like our broadcast machine needs a much better GPU. It has an ATI 5800 in it right now. Right, so that's just ridiculous for what it does. So that's something that's going to get upgraded, and I'm also going to upgrade the OS and just a few like nice to have things that we know we can do now because we have some budget predictability. And we're also going to be posting videos of some of that stuff that I upgrade and work on over the holiday break to the Patreon page. So you can go sign up and get involved in that. We also have different levels down below that kind of give you an idea of where your contribution goes to. But any amount you can afford helps a bunch. Patreon.com/today. If you'd like to make this show better, if there is something you didn't hear us cover, for example, techtalktoday.reddit.com, techtalktoday.reddit.com. Double TechSnap today on the live stream for those of you watching live, because we're going to pre-record one for the holidays. So it's a big day on the JB live stream. But join us tomorrow, too, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, over at jblive.tv. jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar's got all your times, and it automatically converts it to your local time zone. And just a quick note, no Tech Talk Today next week. We're doing best of shows next week. So join us for that. All right, so I'm going to wrap us up with a classic commercial that is really, it's a great holiday idea for those sports fans in your family. If there's somebody that you feel like would maybe enjoy the latest and greatest in sports video games, well, if you can call it that, then I have the perfect gift for you. See you tomorrow, everybody.
I'm Football One, Mattel's lowest price electronic football game.
And I'm electronic quarterback, Coleco's lowest price.
I run from the line of scrimmage.
I start in the backfield and follow my blockers.
Blockers? I don't have any blockers.
I got 7 men on defense.
7? I've only got 5.
I can even pass.
I can't pass.
My receiver runs short, long, any pattern.
Pattern? I don't even have a receiver.
Or I can score a safety.
A safety?
Coleco's electronic quarterback, a lot more football for the money.